Hello, my name is Mystery. As I have been researching this time and how it works, it has been hard for me to come to terms with the idea of nations. Especially as the world today seems to be so globalized, it makes little sense to me to have nationalism. But what is nationalism then? In a very broad sense, it's the concept that a people who are greatly united by language, history, custom, or ethnicity may have their own territory and state. Resultantly, it includes the idea that no nation should be then ruled by another. So from this definition, the key components for nationalism is 1, a unifying characteristic like language or culture, and 2, a physical space, a territory, both of which combine to the exclusion of all others. So, you're either in the club or you're not. To an outside observer like me, this seems to be little more than a justification to divide up the world like it was a monopoly board and to chop it up into little areas. But why would the world need to be divided so? And that is a question worth investigating.
My name is Mystery. For reasons unknown, I have been thrown back into the past almost 100 years, and this is my story.
I guess it's important to start at the beginning and look at the origins of nations. Like with most of these videos now, I'm going to suggest that we go back to the age of revolutions, where bourgeois society was taking the place of feudalism. Now, this transition was creating a great question for the cultures of the world. Without a king, how can there be a kingdom? And then, if there are no kingdoms, what should there be? This line of thinking led to the idea of the nation. Now, the age of revolutions was spurred on by the ideas of liberalism. This gave birth to modern democracy and the rule of law, integral ideas that provide freedoms to individuals. However, if liberalisation was to provide freedoms to the individual needed to be supported by a state bureaucracy, a government order, and have an area in which to practice their freedom, a territory. These two components would become known as the nation. Some attribute the birth of the nation, the idea, to the French Revolution. As the French people spread liberalised society across Europe, bringing down kingdoms in their wake, they marched under the tricolour, their national flag, and to the Marseillaise, their national anthem. So, what we've been able to establish is then that nations are formed by a group of people, bound by a state organisation using iconography. But all this is legitimised by the idea of sovereignty, the authority of a state to govern itself. You've probably heard this term thrown around. People refer to this in a national context as national sovereignty. This authority allows a nation to protect the freedoms of its citizens through government. However, this lovely idea of protection only applies to eligible members, the citizens of a nation. You are only a member by birthright or official acceptance into the club. Accordingly, the world has been carved up into geographical groups with varying levels of freedoms and protections, based not on individual merit, but one's national ties, basically giving some groups of people in the world more power than others. And so the question remains, why make little exclusive clubs all over the planet? In a middle-class society, one where freedom is defined, as we've discussed in previous videos, by money and property, you need to be able to protect those things with laws and standards. So, over the last 200 years, the upper classes of society weaponized individualism using identity. By creating the idea of national identity, to drum up sentiments and feelings in the world's populations through patriotic pride, not for a loving sense of camaraderie, but to divide the world's populations into controllable groups, to stop them from unionizing as a global mass of people. Nationalism pins the world's populations against one another in a very crafty way. Today, people use nationality as their own personal identity, as a primary characteristic of how one describes themselves. Ask someone today, when you first meet them, about themselves, and they will probably state their nationality. This form of identity can become so feverish that people have used it as a justification to hate other nationalities, claim superiority over others, and kill en masse. To me, nationalism seems not to be only divisive but dangerous to humanity. While it's adapted in its complexities over time, nationalism or nationalist sentiment was hijacked by the middle and the upper classes after the fall of feudalism to justify their rights to establish governments within certain areas in order to control a society in the name of their interests. No longer was it up to kings and the church to rule kingdoms, but those with money and property through nations, places with borders, based on the extent of a ruling class seeking independence from the next adjoining ruling class. It had nothing to do with cultural or shared pride that draws these lines on a map, more like trade routes and property boundaries. Nationalism is something that has taken root so well that it is completely taken for granted here in 21st century. So much that it has become a sacred pillar of personal identity. But little more than 200 years ago, the idea didn't even exist. So the next time you're watching your national sporting team and cheering them on, swelling with national pride, understand that the power of that emotion has been purposely cultivated and hijacked by the upper classes of society 200 years ago to justify them making territories for them to rule over and protect their business and property interests from the next ruling class that was a threat to them. Nationalism is a tool so effectively used when coupled with propaganda that it can convince people to go to war in the name of their nation, fighting against people from another country, average people just like them, and dying for a reason that is not even representative of their interests at all. Nationalism truly is a powerful tool unleashed upon the psyche of humanity, and it amazes me that people never stop to think about it, let alone question it. Now, if this made you think, please like it and share it with someone that needs to hear this. If you have any opinions on what's been said, please comment below. And until next time, remember, I am, you are, we are a mystery.